Hi, I just want to go ahead and, like I said, this is going to be my video on the U.S. Constitution. Now, I want to mention a website. It's called constitutioncenter.org. All right? And I will link it in the description below. Now, what I have is something very important, right? Let's talk about yes, I just get this out of the way. This content is for kids with the parents being present. Now, what I talk about in this video, there will be no cussing, there will be no really adult material, but what I am teaching them is about the United States Constitution and what it exactly means, and the current challenges that we are currently facing. I will not go into details of listing places and stuff like that. I will mention some of the constitutional issues at a more of a brief law description that does not imply anything of a derogatory or dangerous or anything that would be pretty much that kids shouldn't be able to hear. So, as far as the thing goes with the Constitution, all right? Amendment number 3, quartering of soldiers. To give you a little bit of background, the British used to go ahead and they would have military soldiers in the United States colonies, total of 13 colonies. The reason why they did this was in response to the Indians, France, the Dutch, you name it. But this was the government forcing its will with what we like to call now as eminent domain upon these houses. This led to a very angry situation, and thus the establishing of Amendment 3, quartering of soldiers. So, as I have it, under the Third Amendment, no soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in a time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. So, with that, there is some situations, and usually the U.S. government is not in a situation where they're going to be putting soldiers in people's houses against their will. Obviously, we want to compensate them. But there have been times where, soldiers as well as emergency evacuation crews and stuff like that, where such as the National Guard was basically set up housing, especially during times of natural disasters and terrorist attacks, more or less recently. And the people were happy to have them there because this was an emergency situation, right? But it was prescribed as to be by law. However, the eminent domain clause is a very touchy subject. States mostly try to pass eminent domain, and it leads to a very, very dangerous situation because it leads to the theft of property. Now, this is going to roll into what we like to call the Fourth Amendment. And the Fourth Amendment, it talks about searches and seizures, all right? So, we go to the Fourth Amendment. Now, parents, this is very important to understand about the Fourth Amendment. Now, the Fourth Amendment, it was the search and seizure of your property and stuff. A police officer cannot search your car or your house without probable cause and or a warrant. They have to have good reason. Unlawful search and seizures is against the law. This amendment has become more and more poignant, more and more concurrent as we currently face very important situations today. We currently face a situation where we have in some states and even counties police harassment, some of it being done upon people of a certain color, especially down in the South in Georgia and stuff like that. Recent incidences of, say, the Ferguson situation in Ferguson, Missouri. And the reason why I say Ferguson, Missouri is not because of what happened with the person that committed if there was, what happened with the person that was killed in the process, but it was the fact that in Ferguson, Missouri itself, people of color were being harassed by the police department. And they were getting their houses searched and seizures. And a seizure is basically where they take something. But it's a little more than that. It doesn't just happen to people who of a certain ethnic minority. It actually happens to everybody. And it's been more poignant but less reported happening in small white towns as well. Yes, I'm using that word, and I'm trying to get a point across. I'm not here to point out racism. I'm just trying to let you know how and why we need to be very vigilant about this amendment and why it's so important. Now, under the Fourth Amendment, it says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall be issued, but upon probable cause supported by the oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Basically, they have to have probable cause or evidence signed by a judge to do a search. And this document that is signed is called a warrant. More or less recently, in the last couple of years, there was a situation down in Houston, Texas, where you had police officers who were going into people's houses with what we like to call a no-knock warrant. Basically, they bust down the door, not knocking in, and they raid the house. This turned out to be fatal for a couple that was living in Arizona. More or less, this was fatal here in California, up in the Antelope Valley. And the problem with these warrants that were issued or these things that were conducted was the evidence. There was no supporting evidence in order to exercise these warrants. Now the question is, was this executed by a judge? Was this executed by the police? And we talk about that responsibility. So as I speak right now, your Third Amendment is basically the quartering of soldiers. The government cannot put military people inside your house or property without your consent, or unless prescribed by law by Congress. There has to be reasons to. And let's be honest, they're not going to. They can easily set up military tents or easily set up public places to be spots where military officials can stay. And if anything, America is very proud of their military because we respect the Constitution. All right? Now, the military respects the Constitution. Now, getting back to your Fourth Amendment right. This has been the biggest debated topic, search and seizures. We have had a situation where you've had police in Nebraska, police in Chicago, take people's stuff, claiming it to be drug money, and these people went to go back to court to get it. And guess what? It was never filed. They were never convicted, so it never really went to the court system. Their stuff was then put into the pockets of these police officers. In Alabama, there was a judge who had connections with the local authorities in town, and they were taking people's stuff. Well, this led to finally a federal investigation. And they finally had the judge arrested because he was making a certain amount of money off of, that's right, seizing people's stuff illegally, which constitutes as theft. These amendments were to protect you from a totalitarian dictatorship. In other countries, you do not have the right to own property. The idea of socialism is a very dangerous one because it does not allow you to have the right to own property. So, this is my video on your Third and Fourth Amendment. And I will leave in the link in the description below the name of the website. One more thing, parents, if you're with your kids, please go get your parents at this moment. I'll give you about maybe a couple of seconds, YouTube has recently been fined by the Federal Trade Commissions, who basically is in charge of business. YouTube channels were recently being demonetized because they didn't go under COPPA, which is a Child Protection Act by the Federal Communications Board. But the FTC went after them because what they were doing is they were doing demonetization. And what the YouTube is guilty of is these videos were making so much money, but they were being demonetized and YouTube was collecting the money. Well, the Federal Trade Commission said, hey, you're either a platformer or a publication. You basically are taking money that does not belong to you. You need to compensate these people for their work. And right now, YouTube has pledged to YouTubers to go ahead and get sponsors. Now, some YouTube channels that have been demonetized, such as China Uncensored or American Uncovered, have managed to find independent sources of revenue through independent sponsors. And this is good that this is going on. But recently, there's been Patreon pages just to help people go and get the money that they need. All right. So, like I said, haven't heard any information on the Federal Trade Commission more than that, but things with YouTube censorship and all that may finally start getting being looked into, as Congress has spent most of the time finding out and questioning Google executives as to why they're attacking censorship upon conservative personalities. Other than that, I'm not here to discuss politics. I just want to go ahead and pass you on the news and the understanding of what's going on with your constitutional rights. So I say enjoy your day and have fun.